deep within you. Beneath the noise of everyday life, there is a quiet space you rarely touch. I often call it the place where the soul whispers, where peace never disappears, where the wisdom of the Creator keeps guiding you, even in your most tired moments. There is an ancient code in that stillness, not written in letters, not carved in stone, but woven through the subtle movements of your inner world. Each time you think, each time you feel, each time you breathe in trust or fear, that code lights up like a mirror, reflecting what you choose to believe is true. I have met many people who thought they were limited, who believed fate was an unbreakable wall. But when they paused, when they listened to the warmth inside, they all realized the same thing. The mind is the key, not the world outside, not the past, but the patterns they repeat in the deepest part of themselves. You are the same. Your life is not locked. You are simply using an old code that has stayed with you since the earliest days, when you did not yet know how to question, when your heart believed everything the way soil believes the rain. I want to gently bring you back to that place, not to awaken pain, but to help you see that you never lost the power to change. You are not the comments people once spoke over you. You are not the mistakes you made. You are the one standing here now with the ability to rewrite what you want to become. Do not rush. Let my words move into you like water flowing slowly over stone, quiet, yet softening everything that once felt hard. Through many years, I have watched a truth that never shifts. Your subconscious does not argue. It only receives. And what you believe is true, whether right or wrong, becomes a seed it protects with absolute loyalty. When you think you are small, it agrees. When you believe you deserve peace, it also agrees. It works like a devoted builder raising a wall according to the blueprint you hand it, whether you draw it by intention or by habit. I want you to know that you are not starting from zero. You are remembering something that has belonged to you for a very long time. There is a new code waiting for you to awaken, not through strain, but through gentle awareness. And when you touch it, the heaviness will begin to fall away. The limits will crack like ice, meeting the first light of spring. I invite you into this journey not as a student, but as someone ready to open their own door. Because deep within you already know that your life has never been closed. It has only been waiting for you to say the first word of beginning. WHATCODEAREYOULIVINGB YWITHOUTHENKNOWINGIT. As I observe the lives of many people, including my own younger years, I have come to see something simple yet profound. We live according to codes we do not realize we are carrying. No one teaches us this in school. No one sits down to explain that every thought is a command, every feeling is a signal, and every belief becomes a line of code etched into the deepest layer of our mind. We simply grow up, collide with life, fear, hope, and then keep believing whatever we have repeated long enough. And these quiet repetitions are the very things shaping each person's life. I often say the mind is like a still lake. When a thought drops in it, creates ripples that spread far and wide. Many people grow used to living inside chaotic ripples without knowing where they came from. They believe life is working against them. But life is not against anyone. Life only responds to the signals rising from within you. When fear fills your inner world, the world you see becomes smaller. When a gentle trust rises in you, reality seems to open. Not because the outside changed, but because you changed the lens through which you see everything. I once met a man named Daniel during a small gathering in California. He told me life always felt heavy. Everything seemed harder for him. When I asked why he believed that, he hesitated and said he did not know, it had always been that way. When I guided him deeper, he remembered 3 words his father repeated throughout his childhood. Life is hard. That sentence, repeated again and again, quietly became law. He did not know it, but he had been living his entire life according to a command that did not belong to him. And when he realized this, he cried because for the first time he saw something simple. He was not living his own life. He was living the life of a sentence. Sometimes we are not blocked by circumstances, but by thoughts we have never examined. These thoughts become frames, and we grow inside those frames, then believe they are truth. But truth is always spacious, gentle, and free. It does not shrink you. Only old beliefs do that. And when you realize they are not yours, you begin to breathe more deeply. The mind is not as complicated as many imagine. It is a loyal system. It does not analyze right or wrong. It does not consider whether you are happy or sad. It only receives what you repeat with strong emotion and turns it into a pattern. If you often think I cannot, the subconscious takes that as a command. If you often see yourself as weak, it takes that as a command too. It does not question. It follows. A woman named Claire once told me that every time a new opportunity appeared, she felt breathless. She always pictured herself failing. When we talked about her past, she remembered her mother telling her that the girls in their family should live safely and not be too ambitious. Her mother meant no harm. She was only speaking from what she believed. But to a child, that sentence became an invisible fence. Claire grew up inside that fence and gave it a soft name: my personality. But personality is only a belief repeated long enough. When Claire understood this, she began to change gently. Not by fighting herself, but through soft awareness. Each morning she looked into the mirror and told herself that life was opening for her. She did not force belief. She simply let the words touch the still place within. 1 week, 2, then 3, and she noticed she was no longer breathless. Opportunities came as before, but her mind no longer ran toward the dark. A new code had been activated in her. You see, you do not need to overturn your entire life to change. You only need to begin with one realization. Not every thought in you is yours. Many thoughts are echoes from someone in the past. And if you have been living by those echoes, you can choose a new voice today. Each time you breathe in peace, you are rewriting your code. Each time you tell yourself you are enough, even just once, you plant a seed. These seeds do not disappear. They rest waiting to rise. And the wonder is that when just one seed blooms, the whole garden shifts. Not because you strain, but because the life within you always leans toward light. Now I want to ask you a slow question, one you can feel with your whole heart. How many things in your life today are not truly your choices, but old commands you have unknowingly followed? If you are here listening, thank you for being present. Your presence is already the first step of renewal. SMALLCHILDHOODSENTENCEES THEFIRSTCODE. When I look back on my years of working with the human mind, I always return to one truth that moves me every time I touch it. Most of the deepest and strongest beliefs in your life were planted when you were not yet old enough to understand their meaning. They did not come from intention. They came from ordinary moments, small and simple, sometimes from a careless sentence. Someone spoke a sentence you unknowingly received as absolute truth. Childhood is the time when the subconscious is widest open, like soft soil after rain, where any seed that falls takes root quickly. A child does not know how to doubt. It cannot tell the difference between a careless comment and an unbreakable law. It has no shield of reason to filter or defend. It simply receives, believes, and stores. And because of that pure openness, childhood sentences have the power to linger until adulthood. I remember a young man named Ethan. On the outside, he was bright and active, but every time numbers were mentioned, he grew confused and avoided them. When I asked why, he only said he lacked talent. But as we went deeper, an old memory rose. At 8 years old, during a simple math exercise, his teacher said aloud that he was slower than the others. There was no ill intention. It was just a passing remark. But to a child trying to understand the world, that sentence became a sign hanging in his mind. You are not good at math. He believed it fully, and he carried that sign for 20 years without knowing it had never been true. I have sat with many adults whose eyes still carried the mark of old sentences like that. A man believed he would never succeed because as a child, his father often sighed that their family was born without fortune. A woman believed love meant suffering because her mother said strong women must endure. No one meant harm. They were only repeating beliefs they had once inherited from the generation before them. Yet these sentences, repeated and absorbed by a young heart, became the secret laws guiding an entire life. A child's subconscious is like open land at dawn, recording every light, every drop of dew, every sound. When someone said you were clumsy, you believed it. When someone said you were good, you believed it. When someone said you were not good enough, you believed that too. Because children do not resist these beliefs, enter gently, like quiet wind, passing through a window. Later, when you grow up, your mind may argue with them, but the subconscious does not forget. It keeps working in the background, repeating the commands it was given, and continuing a story you may not know you have the right to rename, rewrite, or reinterpret. There was once a woman who came to me deeply insecure. Compliments made her uncomfortable. When I asked when she first felt she was not good enough, she paused, then remembered standing before a mirror as a child, hearing her mother say that the girls in their family were not as pretty as others, but were sweet in nature. Her mother meant to comfort her, but the child did not hear the sweet part. She only heard the not pretty part. And that sentence became the distorted mirror she used for years. Many times we are not living by truth, but by memories that were cut short by sentences that turned into rules. And the striking thing is that most of these beliefs have never been re-examined. We heard them once, when we were too young, then carried them for decades, as if they were obvious fact. And this unconsciousness creates limits we mistake as our nature. But I want you to know this gently. You were not wrong for believing those sentences. You were simply responding like a child does. And the beautiful thing is that you are no longer that child. You can return to those old sentences with the eyes of an adult and ask a simple question. Does this truly belong to me? Most of the time, the answer will be no. Freedom begins the moment you realize you are not the sentences others placed in your hands. You are the thoughts you choose today. You are the one writing the code of your mind through awareness and compassion for yourself. And this is the first step of healing. In the next part, I will take you deeper into the landscape of memory, where the seeds of fear and hope were first planted. But before we go there, I want you to hold gently in your heart this simple truth. Not everything you believe is true. Many things are only old stories waiting for you to rewrite them. THESEDOFCCIDENTALANNASSTORY. Some fears do not begin with great events. They do not rise from shocks or painful losses. They come from a quiet evening or a small sentence like a speck of dust falling into water, harmless at first glance, yet creating ripples that last for years. When I tell you Anna's story, I want you to see something familiar in it, because the worry you carry today may also begin from a moment as simple as that. Anna is a 30-year-old woman living in North Carolina. When we met, she did not speak of any crisis or dramatic event. She only carried a fear she could not explain, a fear of the dark. She could not sleep without a light, could not step into her backyard after sunset, and even when her phone screen went black, her heart would pound as if something was approaching her. Yet, she remembered no frightening childhood event. She only knew she had lived with this fear almost all her life. When I asked her when she first feared the dark, she furrowed her brow for a long time. Then suddenly a memory surfaced. She was 6. One winter evening the power went out and the room fell into complete darkness. Little Anna began to tremble, and an adult in the house spoke a careless sentence, meant only to soothe her, saying that the dark was where bad things hid, so she needed to stay close for protection. The adult had no intention of planting fear. They simply wanted the child to stay still. But a child does not analyze, does not weigh or interpret, and does not understand that adults sometimes speak lightly. To her, it was law. And because she heard it in a moment when her heart was pounding and her body shaking, the seed went straight into the deepest part of her mind. You may think such a small sentence is too little to create something so lasting, but the subconscious does not measure by the size of the words. It measures by the emotion tied to them. The child was afraid, and because she was afraid, she believed absolutely. The belief was small as a grain of sand, yet it fell onto the softest soil of her heart. When Anna grew up, it did not disappear. It only changed shape, becoming uneasiness in dark rooms, a fast heartbeat. When night came, the habit of sleeping with the light on, even though she knew she was an adult. She never questioned it. She simply thought it was her personality. When she finished telling me this memory, I saw a small shift in her eyes, like an old door had been opened just enough for light to enter. I told her that her fear was not her nature. It was only an old story she had carried too long. She did not need to fight the dark. She only needed to rewrite what the dark meant to her. I guided her to practice a new image. Each night before turning off the light, she placed her hand over her chest and whispered that darkness was where the body rested, where the mind softened, where life gathered inward to heal. She did not force belief. She simply let the words touch the still place inside her. Then she imagined the dark as a soft blanket, gently holding her, not threatening, only embracing. After 1 week, Anna told me she had managed to sleep without the light for a short while. After 2 weeks, she felt calmer stepping into a dark room. And by the 3rd week, she slept deeply in the dark for the first time, not even noticing when her fear stopped rising the way it used to. Not a miracle, not a sudden transformation, simply a new seed growing stronger than the old one. Whatever is nurtured with gentleness grows with gentleness. Watching her journey reminded me of the garden inside every person. Each childhood sentence is a seed. Some become flowers, some become thorns. Not because anyone wished to hurt us, but because they too were repeating seeds from their own garden. But you do not have to live with the thorns forever. You can pull them out little by little and plant new seeds. You can tend the soil of your mind like a patient gardener, not rushing, not blaming, simply renewing each layer bit by bit. Throughout my life, I have seen many changes like this. Changes that are not loud but quiet shifts, calling people back to themselves. Sometimes all it takes is one new thought, one new sentence, one moment of realizing that fear is not you. You are only the one who once believed it was you. And when you change your belief, you change your life. In the next part, I will take you deeper into how childhood words became an invisible frame, a spiritual architecture you still carry today. And once you see it clearly, you will understand why so many of your choices did not come from free will, but from the echoes of memory. Family. WHEREPROGRAMMING. As I observe the lives of many people, I have come to realize that some beliefs do not belong to them at all, yet they operate inside them more strongly than anything they ever chose. These beliefs do not come from their own experiences. They come from the voices most familiar, the faces most loved, the words repeated in the kitchen, at the dinner table, in the quiet evenings of family life. A family gives us hair-eye color, the way we walk, but it also gives us something far more silent, a framework of belief we carry into life as naturally as we carry our name. I once met a man named David during a conversation in Seattle. He had a gentle smile, worked hard, lived with kindness. But whenever money or success came up, he became unsure, as if stepping into a land that was not meant for him. When I asked why, he said he did not understand. He worked hard, learned much, yet every time he was about to rise to a new level, something in him collapsed. He hesitated, held back, and said a sentence many people know well. "I guess my family is not meant for that." When I heard those words, I knew they were not his. And indeed, as we went deeper, he remembered his grandfather, then his father, both repeating that their family was the kind of people who lived steadily, never rose high, never changed much. They said it not to limit anyone, but simply repeating what they had heard from the generation before them. But to a child, such sentences are not descriptions. They are commands. And David grew up under the command that he could not go far, that there was an invisible ceiling above his life, and crossing it was something not meant for him. When he entered adulthood, he had no idea that every time opportunity came near, something inside him whispered a quiet message. This is not for you. Not intuition. Memory. A memory that did not belong to him, yet moved within him like breath. I have met many people like this. A woman believed marriage happiness never lasted because her mother said all love fades. A young man believed illness was destiny because his father repeated that their family's bodies were weak. Another believed making money was wrong because he grew up in a home where wealth was always spoken of with suspicion. None of them chose these beliefs. They inherited them the way they inherited shoulders and skin. Family is not the mistake. The generations before us lived from the beliefs they were given too. No one taught them that words carry power. No one told them that a child's mind records everything the way fire records the shape of metal. They did not know that each time they sighed, saying our family has no luck, or life is something we must endure, those sentences would sink deeper than any advice they ever offered. A child does not only hear, it absorbs the emotion inside the words, the fatigue, the resignation, the quiet pain, and all of that becomes its inner truth. But here is the hope. Belief is not your flesh and bone. You are not bound to it the way you are bound to DNA. Belief is like clothing worn in childhood. You put it on without choosing. But as you grow, you can pick something new, lighter, freer, truer to who you are. I told David this on a quiet morning. I told him that the invisible ceiling above him had never been real. It was only an illusion built from sentences passed from one generation to the next, without anyone stopping to ask if they were still true. He fell silent, then said he had never imagined he had the right to question what his family believed. But growing up does not mean distancing yourself from family. Growing up means learning that you can love them without needing to carry their limits. We inherit many things, some beautiful, some that teach us care, kindness, empathy. But some are like closed doors formed in the unconscious, causing you to walk through life without noticing the open paths right in front of you. You do not need to be angry at the past to walk through those doors. You only need to see that they are old sentences, not laws. They are someone else's stories, not your fate. And now, if you are hearing these words, I want you to do something simple yet powerful. Comment a single number 1 to let me know you are ready to release at least one old belief you once inherited. You do not need to say what belief it is. Just write one number, a sign that you see the door opening. Because the moment you admit you want to change, the new code begins to activate. THEROOTCHANGINGPRACTICE LOOKINGIHELDWORDSYOUNCEBLIEVED. When someone begins a healing journey, they often reach for new techniques, new affirmations, or big lessons. But something I have come to see again and again is that most of what we need to change is not ahead of us. It is behind us. It lies in the sentences we once heard and never questioned, the ones we never checked to see if they were still true. You cannot rewrite the story of your life without looking at the first lines. And you cannot reset your mind without knowing which commands you are still running on. I have always believed that freedom begins with gentle honesty. Not the kind that criticizes you, but the kind that places a hand over the heart and says, I want to know what is operating inside me. The practice I am about to guide you into is not heavy. It is like opening an old chest of memories, gently looking at each item and seeing which ones still belong to you and which ones are ready to be set down. I often ask people who come to me to do something very simple. Sit down with a blank notebook and write 10 sentences you often heard in your childhood. You may think you remember nothing, but the spiritual memory holds far more than you imagine. When you soften your mind, the sentences you thought were gone rise back to the surface. Some write things like, men must not show weakness, or women must endure to keep peace, or money is hard to earn and easy to lose, or living decently is enough. Do not dream too much. These sentences seem harmless, yet they weigh like stones because they do not just describe the world, they shape the way you walk into it. When you write them down, the words are not the important part. The important part is the feeling in your chest. I always ask people to pause after each sentence and listen to the body. Some sentences make them sink as if a stone has been placed inside the heart. Some bring a chill to the back. Some bring tears as if they have just touched a forgotten child. These emotions are not weakness. They show how deeply those words once entered. And now that you recognize them, you are opening the first door out of them. I remember a young woman who realized while writing her list why she always felt guilty when resting. One of her childhood sentences was, a good woman is someone who sacrifices. That belief made her think her own needs should always come last. And even as an adult living independently, she carried guilt whenever she cared for herself. When she looked at that sentence with the eyes of who she had become, she cried, not out of anger toward the past, but because she saw she had lived too long inside a coat that was never made for her. Those tears were the sound of the old code cracking. After writing your 10 sentences, the next step is to see whether they are still operating in your life. You may be surprised to find that many are still alive in the smallest habits. How you react when someone compliments you, how you welcome money, how you love, how you let go of what no longer fits, how you rise after being hurt. You may think you forgot the old sentences. The subconscious did not. It is still building the world according to a blueprint drawn long ago. And once you see these sentences clearly, you will do the most important part. You will rewrite them. You do not need beautiful words. You only need words that match who you are becoming. If the old sentence said, men must not be weak, the new one can be, I am allowed to feel and to receive support. If the old said, women must endure, the new can be, I am allowed to live in love, softness, and peace. If the old said money is hard to earn, the new can be life supports me in many surprising ways. Speak them lightly, as if talking to yourself, without force, without proving strength. Gentleness reaches the subconscious more deeply than effort ever can. I remember a man named Mark who believed he must always be strong and never tired. That sentence came from his father, who believed men must not show vulnerability. For years, Mark lived inside an invisible armor and let no one near his feelings. When he rewrote the sentence into, "I am allowed to be my true self without hiding," he said it felt like someone opened a locked room inside him. And within weeks, he slept better, had fewer headaches, and felt lighter in his body. That is what happens when you change a sentence. Your body hears it and responds. The final step of the practice is to bring your own voice into the journey. I often encourage people to record themselves reading their new affirmations. Some feel shy, some feel strange. But when they listen back, they realize their voice carries something no other voice can give. Familiarity. The mind trusts your voice more than anyone else's. When you hear yourself speak the new beliefs, the subconscious receives the message faster, deeper, and more steadily. Just as the child you once were trusted the voices of adults without hesitation, now your subconscious will trust the voice of your grown self, the one guiding you forward. This practice does not ask you to change your whole life overnight. It only asks you to look back, see clearly, and choose again. When you dare to face the old sentences, they no longer move you from the shadows. When you rewrite them, you take your first essential steps on the path of resetting the mind. And from that very soil, something new begins to grow. THEBODY. THEMOSTHEHONESTMIROROFEVERYBEL. EIEF. In my years of spiritual guidance, I have come to see that every person carries a mirror they rarely look into. This mirror is not on a wall or resting on a table. It lives in every breath, every movement, every passing sensation. The body is the most honest reflection of what you truly believe deep inside. Not what you say, what you hope to be, but what you repeat in silence, in the unnoticed moments of your day. The body hears all of it. I once met a man named Michael, gentle, hardworking, steady. He came to me not because of illness, but because of a heaviness in his shoulders that had followed him for years. He said his shoulders were always tight, as if holding something invisible. He had tried everything from physical therapy to rest, yet each morning the heaviness returned. I asked him a simple question. "What does your heart usually say about life?" He gave a sad smile and said he always felt like he was carrying the whole world. When he said that, I knew his shoulders did not hurt only because of muscle. They hurt because of belief. For years he had repeated the command, "I must hold everything together," and the subconscious obeyed with complete loyalty. The subconscious does not argue with you. It records, then turns your words into experience. When you say you are carrying too much, the body tightens. When you say you must push through, the body braces. I guided Michael to replace that old command with a gentler message. Whenever he felt pressure, instead of silently saying he had to endure, he placed a hand over his chest and whispered softly, "Life is supporting me." At first, he did not believe it. Belief is not born in one moment. It grows through repetition. Like water softening stone, a new belief slowly softens the old one. And after a few weeks, Michael noticed that his shoulders were not as tense. His breathing deepened. His smile eased. No miracle had happened. His body was simply listening to a new command. I often say the body never argues with you. It only reflects you. When you think you are weak, the body feels heavy. When you think you are threatened, the body contracts. When you think you are loved, the body relaxes. When you think you are safe, Every fiber softens like soil welcoming rain. The strange thing is many people do not know what commands they are giving their body. They live inside familiar sentences without realizing that each one produces a physical response. One thing I have observed is that the disharmony between thought and body never appears by accident. It is the natural reaction of belief. If you often say, "I am exhausted," the body lowers its energy to match the message. If you sigh quietly throughout the day, the body adapts to the slow rhythm of fatigue. If you believe you cannot handle hardship, your heart rate, your muscles, and your nervous system behave as if that belief is true. I once worked with a woman named Laura who experienced many unexplained allergic reactions. She often said her body was fragile, reactive, and easily hurt. When I asked where that belief came from, she remembered her mother worrying every time she sneezed or had a rash as a child. She grew up believing her body was delicate, and that belief stayed with her into adulthood. I taught her to speak to her body with a new tone. "I am safe. My body knows how to recover." The first time she said it, she cried because she had never felt strong enough to speak that way. But a week later, she felt a shift inside. And a month later, her symptoms began to lessen. This is not a denial of science. It is harmony with it. Modern science calls this the mind-body connection, where thoughts, emotions, and beliefs influence the immune system, the nervous system, and hormones. But Joseph Murphy spoke about this decades earlier with simple language. Thought shapes the body. The subconscious listens and the body responds. When you understand this, you see that you are not powerless against heavy emotions or draining habits. You can begin simply by noticing the sentences you speak internally. Sentences like "I am so tired," or "I cannot take this," or "life is too much," are commands the body hears clearly. Not to punish you, but to stay loyal to what you believe. Imagine your subconscious as a quiet builder shaping every cell, waiting each day for a new blueprint. If you hand it a blueprint of fear, it will build with tension. If you hand it a blueprint of peace, it will build with restoration. And the beautiful thing is that this builder never closes its doors. It is always waiting for a new instruction. When Michael returned months later, he said something I will never forget. He told me he had not realized his body listened to him so much. I smiled because many before him had experienced that same moment. The moment they realized the body never betrayed them. They had only been giving it old commands without knowing. And in that moment, life opens into a new rhythm. THELANGUAGETHATAEAT ANDHOWYCELLALW, a Y as a NSWERS. There is something many people only understand when life becomes too heavy to carry. The body never stays silent. It does not speak in words, but it speaks in signals. It speaks through a fast heartbeat when you are worried, through tight shoulders when you carry what is not yours, through shallow breathing when you no longer trust the future, through long-lasting fatigue when your mind has gone too far from what it truly needs. The body is not trying to make life harder. It is only answering the sentences you have spoken to it unconsciously for years. It hears everything. It understands everything. And the most beautiful thing is that it always responds. Modern science describes the communication between thoughts and cells with complex language, but the truth underneath is simple, and Joseph Murphy said it long ago. Every cell in your body is your most loyal listener. It does not doubt you. It does not argue with you. When you say things that make your inner world tighten, the cells contract. When you say things that open your heart, the cells expand like petals meeting sunlight. I remember the story of Laura, a gentle woman with a lovely smile and anxious eyes. She came to me because of persistent allergies with no clear cause. She had tried everything from medication to diet changes, yet her body reacted as if something inside her was constantly on alert. When I asked her what she often said to herself, she paused. Then she sighed and said the sentence she repeated most. "I am weak. Everything tires me easily. My body is not strong enough." I told her that sentence was not just a thought. It was a command. It was the blueprint she had been handing to her subconscious. And the subconscious, faithful like a quiet worker, had delivered it to her cells. The cells heard her call herself weak and responded by becoming more reactive. Not to harm her, but to match what she believed. Cells do not know how to resist. They only know how to be honest. When I explained this, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she whispered that she had never imagined her body trusted her this much. That sentence stayed with me because so many people before her had spoken the same truth with the same startled eyes. The moment they realized their body was never against them, it was only waiting for them to change the words. I guided Laura into a simple practice, not a technique or a miracle, just a conversation with herself. Each night before sleep, she placed her hand on her chest and said slowly, "I am safe. My body knows how to recover. I hear you, and I know you are doing your best for me." At first it felt strange, but the strangeness came only because she had never spoken to her body with love. For years she had spoken to it with fear. Now she was learning a new language. A week later, she told me her symptoms felt lighter. 2 weeks after that, she noticed her resilience changing. Not because she found a new medicine, but because she changed the message she sent downwards. The body is the soil. You are the one placing the seeds. When you plant weakness, the body grows weakness. When you plant peace, the body grows peace. No miracle needed. Only consistency between your words and your cells. One thing I want you to understand deeply is that your cells do not distinguish between real and imagined. They do not know what is memory and what is visualization. They only read emotional tone. When you say, "I am in danger," even if you are only worrying about something that has not happened, the cells react with tension. When you say, "I am safe," even before you fully believe it, the cells soften. The subconscious does not ask you to prove anything. It simply records the emotional frequency you hold longest. And this is why repeated affirmations carry power. Not because of wording, but because of the feeling accompanying them. You do not need to force belief. You only need to speak gently, consistently, and let the body remember. Some people feel nothing at first when they say affirmations. They think they are doing it wrong. But like seeds lying under soil, the silence is not failure. It is the settling stage before growth. I often guide people to create sentences for specific parts of their body. Not to control them, but to connect with them through kindness. When you say to your heart, "I know you are working day and night to keep me alive," the heart hears you. When you say to your lungs, "Thank you for every breath," the lungs hear you. When you say to your skin, "You are allowed to recover," the skin hears you. Cells do not need grand words. They only need your presence. Some nights, I asked Laura to place her hand on her stomach and say, "I know you are healing me every day." When she did, she cried a little, not from pain, but from realizing she had spent years scolding her body and never once thanking it. And in that softening of her heart, her body began to change. I want you to remember this as if writing it gently into the air around you. Your body is not a lifeless structure. It is millions of small living beings listening to you. They do not need your perfection. They only need you to speak a softer truth. The truth that you are learning, that you are opening, that you want peace. And when you do, every cell will answer you. THECOLACTIVAEMIND. INDTHEBELIEFS. YUBSORBWITHOUTAVNKNOWING. There is something few people realize, though it shapes their lives every single day. You are not living only by your own thoughts. From the moment you were a child, you entered an ocean of ideas created by millions of other minds. These thoughts drift through the air like thin smoke, unseen yet constantly slipping into you, shaping your reactions, shaping your emotions, and sometimes shaping decisions you believe are your own. You do not need to try to absorb them. Simply living in a certain field of energy long enough will make you breathe in its frequency without noticing. I saw this clearly when I worked with a young woman named Emily. She lived in a neighborhood where the people around her spoke endlessly about hardship, lack, and an uncertain future. Every morning as she stepped out of her door, she heard the same sentences. Life is worse now. Money is harder to earn. People are not as good as they used to be. She never repeated those words, yet over time, she began feeling tired, negative, and afraid, as if those sentences had moved from the outside into her. When I asked her where her anxiety came from, she could not answer. Because it was not her fear. It was the fear of the collective she had lived inside for too long. The human mind is far more sensitive than we imagine. We do not only hear with our ears. We feel with our energy field. When you enter a place where everyone talks about struggle, your heart grows heavy. When you grow up in a family that speaks constantly of scarcity, money becomes a door that always seems closed. When you live in an atmosphere where fear is the most familiar sound, your heart learns the rhythm of vigilance, even when nothing is threatening you. This is not your fault. It is the nature of the mind. It absorbs the vibration of the environment it rests in. I once spoke with a man named Thomas, who always felt afraid of failure. He had never experienced a major failure, but he lived in a community where doubt was a habit, and people believed the worst would happen before the good arrived. His mind learned to anticipate danger the way one learns a new language. The longer he stayed in that atmosphere, the more he believed the world was more dangerous than it really was. When I asked him when he last truly failed, he could not remember. But he remembered countless stories of other people failing, stories he had heard so often that his subconscious recorded them, as if they were his own memories. The collective mind is powerful enough to make even the strongest doubt themselves. But what is essential for you to understand is this. Not every thought in your head belongs to you. Some are simply echoes of your environment. And unless you learn to recognize them, you will live a life shaped by other people's beliefs without ever realizing it. The first thing I taught Emily was to observe without absorbing. When someone spoke of hardship, she did not need to argue or correct them. She only needed to let the sentence pass through her like wind through an open window. The second thing was to bless instead of fear. When she heard someone say this will not work, she silently whispered, I hope you find a solution. And the third was to remind herself each day, I choose my own thoughts. Not as resistance, but as someone who knows her mind is sacred territory. After a few weeks, Emily said it felt like stepping out of a dark room. The neighborhood had not changed. She had. And when her inner vibration shifted, the collective mind could no longer overwhelm her. What you must understand is that you cannot stop all negative words in the world, but you can stop them from taking root inside you. The collective mind only affects those who do not stand anchored within themselves. When you know who you are, what belongs to you, and what does not, no outside fear can govern you. Your mind is like a house with a door. Not everyone is allowed in. And once you realize this, right has always been yours. The voices of the world lose their power over you. Now, before we end this section, I want to ask you a question. A gentle way for you to return to yourself. How many of the fears you carry are not yours at all, but the fears of the environment you grew up in, or the place you live now? Thank you for being here, for being brave enough to look at what most people never examine. I am THESERTOYOURINNERIDENTITY. When I was young and did not yet understand the subtle laws of the mind, I believed the most important things in life were what we did, what we tried for, and what we achieved in the eyes of the world. But the deeper I traveled into the inner landscape, the more I observed the quiet transformations in those I guided, the clearer it became that true power does not lie in action or circumstance. It lies in the sentence we say to ourselves most often. A sentence that begins with two ordinary words that are in truth the key to the entire treasure of inner strength. Those two words are I am. When someone says I am, they are not simply describing. They are commanding. The subconscious does not treat it as a casual statement. It receives it as identity, as blueprint. And the more you repeat it in silence, the more the subconscious carves your life around it, like a builder quietly constructing a house from the drawing you hand down. I have met so many people who define themselves with painful sentences without realizing their power. Some say I am unlucky. Some say I am hard to love. Some say I am a failure. These sentences do not stay on the lips. They move through the bloodstream, into the cells, into the breath, into every decision. And then a person lives exactly what they declare, not because fate demands it, but because the subconscious obeys the identity repeated most. I remember a conversation with a man named Christopher. He was capable, thoughtful, sincere, yet always felt smaller than others. He did not know why. He only knew that when he entered a meeting room or faced a new opportunity, something in him shrank. When I asked him what name he called himself inside, he answered without hesitation, I am not good enough. He said it lightly as if it were an obvious truth. But that sentence was the root of every fear tightening around him. I told Christopher he had given his subconscious a distorted blueprint, and the loyal builder within him had constructed his life according to it. He was living exactly as someone who believed that identity would live. He sat quietly for a long time, then said he had never realized how dangerous those two words become when tied to fear. But because they are powerful, they can also become the doorway to freedom when you place the right words after them. When you say I am peace, your energy shifts. When you say I am worthy of love, your heart opens. When you say I am valuable, your nervous system slowly reorganizes your life to match it. And when you say I am light, every part of you, even the wounded parts, begins to believe it can walk out of the dark. Some people ask me whether saying such things is self-deception. I smile because I know that what we call self-deception is often the process of replacing self-harming words with words that return us to our true nature. No one is born with a low identity. These identities are learned. And if they were learned, they can be unlearned. I once guided a woman named Grace, who always said I am a burden, even though no one had ever asked her to carry such a belief. When she whispered that sentence in her most exhausted moments, something in me tightened, not because of the words, but because I knew her subconscious was engraving them into the deepest structure of her soul. I asked her to try a different sentence. Not something too big or unbelievable, but something gentle. I am someone learning to love myself. When she said it, her voice trembled, and that trembling told me the new identity had begun to touch her. Identity does not change through force. It changes through soft repetition. It changes when each night you quietly tell yourself, I am supported, I am capable of healing, I am allowed to begin again. And when you whisper these sentences in stillness, the subconscious begins to record them. You do not need to prove them. You do not need to argue. You only need to speak them often enough that the builder within you recognizes the new design. There have been nights when I sat alone in my study and looked back at the turning points of my own life, and I saw clearly that each turning point began with a moment when I called myself by a new name. When I was young and anxious, I called myself someone who was afraid. But the day I began saying, I am someone opening to peace, life began to shift. When I once saw myself as weak, I stayed trapped in that belief. But the day I said I am someone who trusts the sacred voice within me, I stepped into a different chapter. I understood then that no miracle arrives in silence. The miracle begins the moment we change the way we name ourselves. If you ask me what is most important when learning to reset the mind, I will tell you with steady clarity. Honor the words I am. They are commands. They are doors. They are prayers. They are maps. They are the seeds of everything you will become. And once you know how to use them with awareness, your entire life begins to change color. TheMomentTheold. CODEINSTOCHANGEDIRECTION. In all my years observing the human mind, there is one truth so profound that every time I witness it, I fall silent. It is the moment the old code you have carried for so long begins to break, and a new idea slips in like a beam of light cutting through the dark. This moment is quiet, almost invisible, but it is the turning point of an entire life. I have always called this moment acceptance. Not acceptance as surrender, but acceptance as an open door within the soul. It is the moment you stop resisting the new, stop proving yourself right or wrong, and simply acknowledge that you have held an old belief for too long, and it is time to set it down. Not with anger, not with struggle, but with gentle awareness. I remember a man named Andrew. He walked in with a strong exterior, yet after only a few minutes of listening, I sensed a child inside him who had always feared abandonment. He said that no matter how much others loved him, he always felt not enough, always afraid they would leave. When I asked why, he said he did not know. But truth lives deeper than thought. After a long conversation, a memory rose. He was standing in front of a door that had just closed behind his mother as she went to work a night shift. He did not understand why she left. He only knew she was gone, and that feeling followed him like a shadow. Through adulthood, he carried the sentence, "I will be left behind the way others carry their breath." No one needed to repeat it. He repeated it silently every day. And the subconscious loyal, as always, shaped his life around that identity. He loved but feared, he received but felt empty. He stood in rooms but felt outside the door. But then one quiet night, while we were working together, something changed. I asked him to close his eyes and listen to his own breath. Then I invited him to speak a new sentence, not as a wish, but as a truth. "I am love." He said it slowly, softly, almost too small to reach the air around him. But it was large enough to reach something inside. I watched his shoulders drop. His face softened. A tear fell, not of despair, but of release. It was not the tear of pain. It was the tear of acceptance. He did not have to prove anything. He only had to admit that he had believed the wrong thing for too long. And in that very moment, the old code that had run his entire life stopped like a worn gear that finally lost its momentum. I have seen this moment many times in many different people. A woman who carried the fear of poverty her whole life only needed one moment to accept that she deserved fullness. A man who carried the belief of worthlessness only needed one moment to recognize that his value had never depended on anyone. In that moment, they did not become new people. They simply returned to who they had always been, beneath the old beliefs. People often ask how they will know when this moment of acceptance arrives. I always say you will not recognize it with your mind, but with your body. It comes when you breathe deeper without trying, when a soft space opens in your chest like soil after rain, when you no longer fight to believe the new, because the new has found its way in. True acceptance does not require force. It only requires that you stop blocking it. You can prepare for this moment by choosing a new belief and repeating it each day in stillness. Not to convince yourself, but to clear the path. Then one day you will say the sentence as usual, and your heart will suddenly open as if whispering, "I have been waiting for this." When that happens, you will know. That is the moment the old code dissolves and the new begins to write. And now, if you are reading these words, I want to invite you one gentle step further. Comment, "I am ready to change," or simply the number 1 to let me know you have arrived at the point where your soul begins to open to a new version of who you are becoming. SHARING THEACTIONOF PERSONWHOISRE WRITINGTHERO In my years walking with souls, seeking their way back to peace, I have noticed a strange yet consistent phenomenon. When a person begins to share what they are learning, when they speak their new truth aloud in their own voice, the code they wish to write into their mind grows stronger, clearer, and more rooted. It is like planting a seed in the soil. Only when you water it each day does it take root. Sharing is the water that helps the new seed in your consciousness grow. Many people think they should only share once they have fully stepped out of the dark. But light often arrives while we are still guiding ourselves through the dimness. You do not need to be a teacher to speak what is true. You only need to be honest about what you are learning. When you say a new affirmation to someone else, your subconscious hears it again. When you remind someone of the strength found in peace, the energy within you resonates with that same frequency. When you encourage someone to believe in renewal, you reinforce within yourself that renewal is possible. I remember a woman named Helen. She came to me with a heart worn down by years of feeling not enough. We worked together to replace the sentence "I am unworthy" with "I am someone of value." But the moment that truly anchored the new code was not the hours of quiet self-practice. It was the day she sat beside a grieving friend and gently said, "You deserve a better life." When she spoke those words, her expression changed. Her voice no longer trembled the way it had when she first said the new sentence to herself. She believed it a little already, and when she spoke it aloud, she believed it even more. Sharing always works like this. Each time you express a new truth, you do not just send it outward. You send it deeper inward. When you tell someone to be gentle with themselves, your subconscious hears you acknowledging the value of gentleness. When you tell someone they are enough, you chip away at the last remaining bricks of your own belief in lack. When you tell someone about the power of the mind, you are teaching your own body and soul a truth that has always been yours, but was covered by years of doubt. I once spoke with a man named Samuel who had battled a feeling of uselessness for decades. When he began practicing the sentence, "I have worth," it felt foreign, like wearing shoes that did not fit. But one evening he overheard his young niece saying, "She always disappointed people." He held her close and said, "You are loved just for being you." When he told me this, his voice broke, because it was the first time he had spoken aloud something his own heart had longed to hear. And in that moment, the old code in him began to tremble. Every word he offered the child was also a word offered to the forgotten child within himself. The subconscious does not distinguish who you are speaking to. It only records the energy of the message. When you share goodness, you strengthen goodness. When you speak of trust, you deepen trust. When you talk about renewal, You widen the doorway for renewal to enter your life. No act of sharing is small. A gentle sentence you offer a stranger on a heavy day can loosen a dark corner inside you. A word of encouragement given to a coworker can be the moment your subconscious realizes you too deserve a new chapter. A story of healing you tell someone else may be the first time you recognize how far you have come. What I want you to understand deeply is this. Sharing is not giving away something already perfected. Sharing is part of the becoming. Each kind word you speak is a brick placed into the foundation of your new mind. Each compassionate glance you offer someone is a small crack in the old walls of your own beliefs. And every time you speak something true, good, and uplifting, you are slowly, gently, steadily rewriting your inner code. So do not wait until you are flawless to speak. Speaking is part of the perfection. Do not wait until you are no longer afraid to talk about peace. Talking about peace is what brings you closer to it. Do not wait until doubt has vanished to speak of faith. Faith is born from repetition, not certainty. Remember, your mind is soil and your words are seeds. When you plant a seed in someone else, it also takes root in you. When you bring light outward, the light reflects back to you. And when you give away what you are learning, you become someone who learns faster than anyone. That is how you rewrite your life, one kind sentence at a time. WHENTHEQUIENTHESTOVERYTHOUGHT. THEQUIATLANGUAGEOFHEALING. Through years of watching people move beyond old layers of belief, I have learned that the mind and the body are never truly separate. You do not have two different systems. You have one single flow of energy, sometimes appearing as thought, sometimes as emotion, sometimes as physical sensation. Every time you think of something, the body listens. Every time you feel fear, the body responds. And every time you whisper a gentle sentence or a harsh one to yourself, the body receives it as instruction for how it should function. I once worked with a woman named Margaret, who had spent years feeling as if her body was weakening with time. She said she became sick, more often felt more tired, struggled to sleep. When I asked what she usually thought about her body, her first answer was, "I am going downhill." She was not blaming herself. It was simply a habit. But that habit had become a command. I told her that every time she said that sentence, she was sending a wrong map to her cells. Not because they were weak, but because they were obeying what she believed. To help her understand this more deeply, I guided her in a simple practice. I asked her to place her hand on her chest and slowly say, "I am recovering a little more each day." At first, she laughed because it felt unfamiliar, but as she continued with more stillness, I watched her shoulders soften. Her body received a new signal, even if it was a tiny one, and the body responded. Not instantly, but in the subtle shifts you notice only when you become quiet enough. I have always believed that the body is the most loyal companion we have. It never works against us. It only follows us. When you are tense, the body tightens to protect you. When you are gentle, the body opens to restore itself. And when you love yourself, the body does everything it can to return to balance. But when you spend years speaking to yourself with criticism, fear, and tired predictions, the body takes all of them seriously as instructions. I remember a man named Robert who told me his stomach was always weak. He said it calmly as if it were simple truth. But when I asked when that belief began, he remembered his father saying the same thing about himself. And as Robert grew up, every time he felt stressed, he repeated the same sentence. Over time, his body followed the belief, not because it was fragile, but because it obeyed. I guided Robert into a new approach. I asked him to place his hand on his stomach and speak simple sentences like "Thank you for working for me," or "I know you are trying." It changed the way he communicated with his body. He no longer saw it as something betraying him. He began to see it as something that needed to be heard. And the body responded. The pain softened. The tension eased. He did not fix everything in a day, but he learned that healing is not forcing the body to change. It is teaching the body to trust something new. There were evenings when I would sit with people struggling with their bodies, and I would ask them to whisper a simple sentence before sleep. "I am being supported," or "My body knows how to return to balance." These sentences sound small, but this is the language of cells. Cells do not understand long explanations. They understand the frequency of gentleness. When you speak with fear, the body contracts. When you speak with delay, the body stays uncertain. But when you speak with even a little trust, the body begins to move toward healing. I have watched this long enough to know that no one is as weak as they think. People only grow accustomed to sending their bodies tired commands without realizing they can change the message. And the first step is understanding that the body hears every thought, every word spoken aloud, and every whisper inside the mind. Sentences like "I cannot take this anymore" or "I am always tired" are not fleeting emotions. They are signals sent to your cells, and your cells respond exactly as instructed. But here is the beautiful truth. When you change the signal, the body changes too. You do not have to fully believe it on the first day. Belief is not the requirement for the beginning. Presence is. You simply need to show up for the new sentence. When you say "I am recovering," even if part of you doubts, the body still receives it. And day by day, cells learn again how to open, how to soften, how to rise like small buds at the edge of morning. I once told a patient to think of the body as a garden. If you scold it for winter, it stays cold. But if you speak to it of the light that is coming, it begins preparing to bloom. The body is not resisting you. It is waiting for you to say the right sentence. When you understand this, healing stops being a battle. It becomes a conversation you have delayed for too long. But no matter when you begin, the body will listen. It will wait, and it will respond with more kindness than you expect. MASTERYOUROWNFREQUENCY ANDNOTLATTINGGTHEWRITEYOURCODE. As I observe the lives people move through, what strikes me most is not that they lack strength, but that they do not realize how many of their beliefs were not born within them. Each day we step into an ocean of information, emotion, and the thoughts of others. These waves enter us so quietly that we begin to mistake the world's echo for our own voice. But it is not. Collective mind. The thoughts repeated by a community, a family, a culture, has more influence than most people ever imagine. And if you do not protect your inner space, you will live a life written by the world rather than a life chosen by your soul. I once worked with a man named Jonathan who lived in an environment where everyone believed life was always hard. They said it at meals, at gatherings, at work. They did not intend to spread fear, but fear had become their habit, their shared foundation. Jonathan grew up hearing these words until he believed difficulty was the natural state of life. Whenever something good happened, he waited for something bad to follow. Not because he was pessimistic, but because he had absorbed the collective belief the way he absorbed the air around him. When he came to me, he said he always felt something was wrong, even when things were going well. I asked him a question I often ask people who have lived long inside negative atmospheres. Are these thoughts really yours? He sat in silence for a long time. Then he said something I will never forget. I do not know anymore. They have been inside me too long. In that moment, I knew he was not alone. Many people carry fears that never belong to them, but they feed those fears because they cannot tell which voice is genuine and which is an echo. Collective mind can be a source of strength when shaped by love and support, but it can become a burden when shaped by fear and doubt. What matters is knowing that your mind has the right to choose. You do not have to take in every belief the world hands you. You can stand in a crowd without matching their frequency. You can hear negativity without letting it touch you. Like a house with a door you can open when you wish and close when you need. Your mind works the same way. I taught Jonathan a simple but powerful practice. Each time he heard a sentence that made him uneasy, he did not argue or resist. He simply whispered within himself, "That does not belong to me." And whenever he felt a fearful thought rising, he took a deep breath and reminded himself, "I choose my own thoughts." At first it felt strange, but after a few weeks the confusion he carried for years began to dissolve. He told me it was the first time he felt space inside his mind space, to think rather than react to the fear around him. Your mind does not need to fight the world. It only needs to remember it can remain steady even when the world shakes. Some people grow up in families that worry constantly, yet they still create a space of peace inside themselves. Some live in societies full of doubt, yet choose to believe in goodness. Some walk through chaos, yet become people of stillness. Strength is not in changing your environment. It is in refusing to let the environment write your code. I once spoke with a young woman named Olivia, who felt responsible for carrying everyone's sadness. She said that whenever someone was disappointed, she absorbed it as if it were hers. I told her compassion does not mean taking on every burden. It means seeing understanding and staying rooted in your own clarity. If you let the pain of others enter your mind completely, you drown in their frequency. But if you keep your inner light and offer only gentleness, you help them without losing yourself. The most important thing I want you to remember is that your mind has its own frequency. And when you hold that frequency long enough, the collective mind no longer shapes you. You begin to shape the space around you. Like a large bell that makes the smaller bells vibrate, your frequency can help those living in fear feel calmer. When you live with clarity, others begin to see more clearly. When you stand firm, those around you feel they can stand firm too. But to hold your frequency, you must start with a very honest question. And it is the question I want to leave with you today. Of all the thoughts you carry each day, how many truly belong to you? And how many are the fears of others you absorbed without noticing? Thank you for being here listening and being brave enough to look at something most people never examine. YOURNEWNAME WHENTHESOULISCALLEDB YITSTRUEIDENT. There is a truth I spent many years learning and many lives witnessing. People do not change when their circumstances change. People change when their inner identity changes. When someone changes the way they call themselves, their entire life shifts. What they receive, what they hold, what they dare to walk toward, all of it follows the name their soul responds to each day. I once worked with a woman named Melissa, who always described herself with small diminishing phrases like "I am just the kind of person who cannot," or "I am not someone people choose." She did not understand why her career never opened, no matter how hard she worked, and why her relationships always stayed half-formed. But as I listened longer, I saw that the problem was not her effort or her ability. The problem was the way she defined herself each time she closed her eyes. She did not call herself by strength. She did not call herself by worthiness. She only repeated the name fear had given her in childhood. And as always, the subconscious simply followed that name and built a life that matched it. I told her that some doors do not stay closed because they are locked, but because the person standing in front of them is holding the wrong key. The key to your life is the sentence you speak after the words I am. What you repeat becomes identity. Identity becomes habit. Habit becomes reaction. And reaction becomes a life. People do not live according to their dreams. They live according to the identity they believe is true about themselves. I told Melissa another story about a man named Stephen. For years, he carried an invisible name inside him. I am someone who ruins things. He could not remember who said it to him first, but he remembered the feeling of being a child blamed for something he did not do. And that feeling over time became his name. Because of that identity, he chose jobs beneath his ability, stepped back whenever success approached, and sabotaged himself the moment things grew bright. Until one day, during a long conversation, I asked him a simple question. What name would you like to be called by in your own mind? He looked at me as if it had never occurred to him that he had the right to rename himself. Then he said slowly, I want to be called someone who builds, not someone who breaks. I told him to repeat it in silence each night, not as a healing technique, but as a calling away of inviting his soul back into its true shape. 3 weeks later, Stephen said he no longer behaved like before. He felt calmer in decisions, more patient in action, more confident in moments that once scared him. Not because he forced himself, but because the name inside him had changed. Identity is a command. The body obeys it. The mind obeys it. Life obeys it. When you say I am a failure, you write failure into the blueprint of your subconscious. When you say I am not loved, you command your heart to close. When you say I am only this, you shrink your soul to fit the box someone else placed you in. But when you change your name, everything changes with you. I have seen people carry invisible names like I am a disappointment or I am a burden. And when they dare to choose a new name like I am learning to love myself or I am worthy, the light returns to their eyes. Not because of miracles, because this is the natural law of the mind. A new identity does not create a new person. It simply opens the door for the true person to step out. There were nights when I sat with souls lost in their old stories, and I asked them to close their eyes and imagine placing a hand upon their own file, the record of who they believed they were. I told them to look clearly at the old name they had carried too long, the name they no longer wanted to answer to. Then, with gentleness, I invited them to place a new name upon that file. Not a name to impress anyone, not a name to show off, but the name of who they were becoming. One woman chose, I am chosen by peace. A young man chose, I am the beginning again. A mother chose, I am a source of love. And as they lived with those names long enough, the subconscious accepted them as the new foundation. Their lives shifted as naturally as water finding a new path. You cannot rise above something while you still answer to the name of it. The one who carries the name I am alone will not see those reaching out. The one who carries the name I am weak will not notice their strength awakening. The one with the name I am unworthy will turn away every good thing, even as it touches their hands. But the one who carries the name I am renewal will open the door. The one who carries the name I am light will see the path. The one who carries the name I am peace will find peace, even in chaos. I often say that the true miracle is not when someone heals, but when someone dares to rename themselves. Because in that moment, they stop walking the old path. They stop living the old story. They begin rewriting the story by calling the soul by its true name. And when the soul is called by the right name, it always answers. ENDING, ANDALSOABEEGINNNG. When I look back at the journey you and I have walked together, my heart grows still the way a lake settles when the wind stops moving. Not because the journey was perfect or free of challenge, but because I can feel the quiet shift inside you. A gentle movement, subtle but true. And it is these kinds of movements that are the clearest signs that your mind has begun rewriting its own code. I have spent a lifetime observing this quiet power. I have watched people who believed they would never change suddenly open like a flower finding the first morning light again. I have watched hearts that seemed hardened begin to soften simply because they learned to speak to themselves with a gentler voice. I have watched people carry pain for years only because they did not know that healing begins with a new thought, not an external miracle. And I have seen this in you as well. Each chapter you pass through, each sentence you read with presence, was a small knock on the door of your own being. You did not need a loud echo, only the steady rhythm of returning. The mind does not change through shock. It changes through tender consistency, through coming back to yourself day after day and choosing a better thought, a truer name, a higher truth. What I want you to understand most deeply is that you have never lacked strength. You only forgot how to use it. You have never lost the ability to renew yourself. You simply carried stories that were not yours for too long. And you have never walked alone. There has always been a clear, peaceful, patient part of you waiting for your return. Now that we have reached the final part, I do not want you to think this is an ending. Everything you discovered here is not meant to be read once and set aside. They are seeds. Seeds need time to root. But once they do, your life will move in ways you did not expect. Remember this. No one can write your code anymore. Not the past. Not fear. Not the noise of the world. The authority is in your hands now where it has always belonged. And each time you whisper a kinder thought, each time you choose peace instead of anxiety, each time you use the words, I am as a call for your soul to come home, you are building a new life. If there is one message I want to leave with you before we close this journey, it is this. You do not need to become someone else. You only need to return to yourself, to the version of you that you have always been but never dared to fully see. And when you do, everything you have been seeking will begin to find its way toward you. Because your mind, when called by its true name, always knows how to return to the light.